Hello, family. Welcome back to another episode of Living Beyond with Hope. I am so excited to have you back here and excited today because we have an interview. And I love interviews because it allows us to see not only the story and how they are living beyond now, but to understand the tools and resources they use to be someone that can live the life they love. Because of that, today's episode is brought to you by audible.com, where you can get a free audiobook download. So perhaps if there's a book mentioned today that you would like to get your hands on, as well as a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/LBWH for Living Beyond with Hope. With over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player, you can continue to learn and live beyond your diagnosis or label. Now, let's dive into today's episode. You're listening to Living Beyond with Hope. Hey, that's me.
Welcome to the podcast. This podcast is meant to help you realize you're more than a label, and you too can create a life you love despite it. Each week, we bring you tips and inspiring messages to help you take the positive steps in your health that will allow you to live beyond. Now sit back, relax, meal prep, or take a walk as you dig into today's topic with your host, a gal living her life to the fullest with type 1 diabetes, Hope Mangiafico.
In today's episode, we will discover how Allie wrestled with perfectionism and how she began living beyond it through acceptance and just fully embracing it. Perfectionism isn't exactly something Allie would have chosen, but her story will show you how she is now living beyond it and embracing it each and every day. Welcome, Allie. So glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Hope. It's a pleasure to be here.
So awesome. Well, right away, we want to get to know you. So go ahead and share with the family kind of what you love to do, who you are, what your hobbies are, and just what you love about life.
Absolutely. So I live in beautiful Boulder, Colorado, and my husband and I chose to live here because we really enjoy the outdoors. We love to be able to hike anytime we want, and there's just a wonderful feeling of nature here. The community is great. So we really enjoy living here. I'm a big family person, Hope. So I actually moved back to Colorado after many years because my niece at the time was 8 months. She's now 3.5. So I got to be a big part of her upbringing, and it's just really fun to be close to family. Yeah. I'm really into teaching group fitness classes. That was actually the start of my involvement in the wellness and fitness industry, and it really is the heart and soul of what I do. And I also love to travel, and I love to cook as well. So those are kind of a few things that you'll find me doing on the regular.
That's my kind of gal. I love it. That's awesome. So, okay, so cool. So you definitely already had some healthy habits going on. So tell me, and I don't know if the fitness and wellness industry kind of had you enter that perfectionism kind of state of mind, but tell us, like, what's your story behind how you felt like you were facing perfectionism and how it impacted your life. And I don't know if it goes into kind of the things you love about life, but I don't know if there's a particular moment or anything like that, but feel free to share with us of your story.
Yeah, I think for me, it was a few particular instances in my life where I realized, the behaviors and the emotions that were coming up for me, because I think subconsciously I always knew that I struggled with perfectionism. However, when I did enter the industry, that was exasperated majorly, as I'm sure you can imagine. And so the two instances for me where the perfectionism really started to show up was, the first was during my divorce. I, was in a very toxic relationship. And up until that point, I think that people saw me as, I was a, 3-star athlete, and I had all these things going for me. And it was the first time that I basically was coming out to the world and saying, hey, my life is not perfect. In fact, it's far from it. And so, no one grows up thinking that this is going to happen to them. And so that was one of the first times in my life where I realized, okay, not only am I not perfect, but it's so important for me to understand this at the core of what it is. And so moving forward, I really chose to go after my dreams. I was able to achieve a lot of amazing things that I had always wanted to do. And unfortunately, in the wellness and fitness industry, my perfectionism was at an all-time high. I mean, I was filming Xbox videos and other educational DVDs for fitness companies, and I could not handle it anymore. I started to find myself binge eating. I was overthinking food all the time. It was very, very unhealthy. And that was really the point for me where I thought, okay, something's got to give.
I see that. Okay. So that makes complete sense. So it sounds like entering the industry even more to it kind of like it's an interesting situation because you enjoy fitness so much and cooking so much, but this whole perfectionism label really, I feel like temporarily probably hindered that, right? Until you kind of figured out the whole acceptance and embracing part.
Oh, for sure. And I think up until that point, I heard a lot of people use the word perfectionism kind of as like a badge of honor. I'm a perfectionist.
Yes.
And in the beginning I thought, well, yeah, I am too. And what I realized as I got older and I really started to, love self-help and really learning more about who I was at my core, I realized that it's not so much a badge of honor, but there's many, many things that perfectionism actually hinders us from, which is, allowing ourselves to be fully seen, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. Those are things that I never really realized were so severely impacted by the perfectionism label.
Absolutely. I love that. So what was kind of like the deciding moment for you, like a specific event or time where you realized like, okay, something has to give?
Yeah. I mean, it was most definitely when I had moved to a new city and I was really getting into a lot of filming for fitness DVDs. And I, prior to that, I was being very strict with my food. What started as I had a couple of photo shoots coming up for the industry. I wanted to really be in great shape or whatever. And the ironic thing is I was always in great shape. Like there was no reason to do it, but it was sort of just what you did. And it just was a domino effect of, really having control of my food and then having control of my exercise. And a lot of this is about control, right? Feeling in control. And so
Absolutely.
After a couple of the fitness DVDs, I was standing in my kitchen, literally with the spoon and the peanut butter jar. And I remember eating it mindlessly. And at the time, I was saying to myself, you're not even hungry. Like, what are you doing? But I couldn't stop myself. And that was very scary for me because up until that point, binge eating was not an issue for me. It wasn't a thing, but I had known from my own research and reading and knowing a lot of folks who did struggle with it, that this was a real hindrance that I needed to come to terms with. And so I decided, I need to leave the industry for a while. I need to get well. I need to work on myself. And so that's what I did. And I kind of made a big drastic change. I moved to Colorado and I've never looked back since.
I don't want to say I love that story, but I do because I can relate to that in a lot of ways as well. And I think that so many listeners would be able to relate to that because a lot of times I loved how you said you want to take a step back and just become well. Like so many of us, whether it's because of what we see on like fitness models or just magazines, like we view wellness a lot of times as a physical feature, and it starts so much deeper and it's more internal. And I think that what you just said is probably such a breath of fresh air for so many people.
Well, and you're right. There is such an emphasis on external, and as we'll talk more in this episode, I am such a huge believer and proponent for intrinsic. Everything's got to be intrinsic. So, when your goals are about what you look like, or when you lose those 10 pounds, I can tell you from not only my own experience, but also after 10 years of working with clients, that
it won't last.
It won't last. And what happens is, Hope, we're avoiding the underlying issue.
Yes, gosh.
We're basically slapping a Band-Aid on it.
Yes.
And here's the hard part. And this is what breaks my heart, is people say, why am I failing? Why can't I stick to this diet? Why can't I stick to this program? And here's the thing. You're not failing. The industry is failing you.
Yes. I love that, because I felt like a failure for so long trying to figure out my life. I feel like our journey is very similar, and I felt like a failure because, a little different than you, with my diabetes specifically, I would try different, like, quote unquote diets, and I always knew it needed to be a lifestyle thing, but I would be like, maybe I should do macro counting, or maybe I should do carb cycling, or maybe I should just focus on paleo, or maybe, like, those aren't solutions. Like, those are not solutions at all. I never felt good about myself. My diabetes was out of whack. And at the end of the day, I felt like a failure. And it's exactly what you just said. It was the industry and me scrolling mindlessly through social medias of people posting results of things and what they were eating and this, that, and another. And I was comparing, and it was awful.
Yeah, it's very easy to get wrapped up in it, but it's also easy to get so engulfed with it all that you completely lose yourself, and you get to this point in your life where you think, and for what? I mean, it loses its importance when you start to lose everything else in your life.
Yes, absolutely. God, that's so good. Such good stuff. We're not even like anywhere close to being done. I love it. So tell me, okay, so clearly it is so obvious that you have definitely made a change, but like, how did you go about making that change? Through research, through a friend, family member, since you love family and you're a family person, a doctor? What was your process like?
So the first part of my journey was, of course, leaving this career, and it was hard. I describe it like this. I had a dream, and I worked for 5 years to get there. And the hard part is, a lot of us, we see somebody and it looks like everything is great with them and they have the best job or whatever. But unfortunately, what we don't see is what happens behind the scenes. And so when you sort of idolize, whether it's a career or a certain individual, sorry, there's a train going.
I hear that. I was like,
I'm so sorry.
Are you playing music? What
I'm
is
so sorry.
this
No,
nonsense?
it comes like every 3 hours. You can edit that out, of course. What was I saying? Okay, so when you idolize a certain career or a certain individual, it's very scary, because what happens in my case is I achieved that dream and that goal, and it felt really empty. I remember sitting in my living room thinking, here I am, being where I thought I wanted to be. I have no family close to me. I have very few friends. And it was kind of a pivotal moment in my life where I really decided that my family comes first. And although there were many parts of the career that I loved, there were also many parts that were stripping pieces of myself away that I didn't like. So I had to walk away, which was really difficult. I moved to Colorado and spent a lot of time working on myself, spending time with loved ones. I stayed in the industry. I was still working in a health club, but in a very different area. It was good for me. I was able to do a lot of healing and really work on myself. I removed a lot of the triggers in my life. And one of those number one triggers, Hope, was social media.
Yes, I believe that. And I hate how I say I hate it, but it's how I, change lives. But it's just growing so rapidly as well. And it's like Oh, I don't even know. Especially like Instagram and stuff. But like the good thing is, not to take away the mic from you, but the good thing is, which I feel like you should probably hit on this, is the increase of like live social media things to be a little bit more raw and real, and hopefully break some of that, some of those
Yes.
issues.
And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the beauty of Facebook Live and Periscope is there is no editing, and I'm putting quotation marks around that, your life. I mean, you are what you are. And, you know, I hope you and I have had a lot of conversations about this, but I feel drawn to those because I feel that that is real. I don't want people to have any false sense of, you know, that my life is a certain way. I mean, we all have our stuff, all of us. And it's
Absolutely.
important when you're scrolling Instagram and, you know, someone's feed is absolutely perfect and, you know, their food is on point and their abs, if that's what you're into, but we can definitely get into that. That stuff it's toxic
Yes.
because you will eventually have a hard time separating fantasy from reality. You think that that's someone's reality and that your life just, you know, in a lot of ways you feel like it's not enough. And I'm literally want to be the one to tell you that your life is enough. When you remove those things, you start to get back to real relationships. I mean, I struggle with social media because nothing makes me happier than going out with a girlfriend and having a cup of coffee and really just diving into life and and being vulnerable, you know. So removing social media, I did that for about 4 to 6 months, and that was very, very helpful for me. But ultimately, it all came down to the self-love. And I know that we're hearing this a lot, and I know that a lot of people are kind of wondering, well, what does that even mean, you know? But it is so critical because ultimately with perfectionism, it's not loving yourself the way that you are, feeling like you need to edit yourself, feeling like you need to be like so and so. And so when I decided to accept this is who I am, this is what I have to offer, these are the gifts that God has blessed me with, that's when I really started to blossom. And it's also when I started to have peace with myself, with my own exercise, and with food.
Yes, that makes sense. Oh, so good. So where are you now? And exactly, like, okay, so you're talking about self-love. Like, what steps did you take to actually learn to have self-love? And like, what were you successful the first time, or, you know, like a lot of things in life, no, or each day is a battle? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, there was a long period of time where I have what I call, you know, relapses. So especially with when you're healing from binge eating, you know, I like to tell my clients that when you're on that healing journey, it starts to happen less and less, but it doesn't just go away. It doesn't just disappear overnight. And so for me, it was, you know, they were happening less frequently, but I was also doing a lot of reading. I mean, I dove into so many self-help books, like I had mentioned earlier in the episode. I truly believe that if I can learn as much as I can from other people's, you know, takeaways from their own life, that helps me to be the best version of myself. And so one of the things I would really recommend to people is, you know, find authors, find certain books that you can really get engulfed in, because that helped me tremendously. Also having a great support system. You know, what's so funny is that I met my husband about a year and a half after I had sort of started this healing journey. And what was so ironic to me was I was at my heaviest I've ever been, and he loved me exactly as I was. And I think a lot of the binge eating came from, you know, like I said, not feeling like my body was enough, essentially it not being perfect, which it's not, but it was such a beautiful thing for me because, you know, I don't want to say that love healed me as far as my relationship, but I had done so much work that by the time I met him, it was kind of that missing link of like, hey, I love you exactly how you are, and I don't want you to change anything. And so that was
That's
such a beautiful moment for me
yes.
because, you know, after that, I did go on to lose a lot of weight, but the reason why was because I just let go. I let my body do what it wanted to do. I started moving because it felt playful. If there's one thing I would recommend to listeners, it's find something you love. If you feel like whatever you're doing is punishment or you just don't look forward to it, then you just haven't found the right thing for you. And that's okay. But you got to find something that you love. And if that's playing tennis, great. If that's, surfing, awesome. Find what works for you. And so when I started to do those things, I started thinking less about food. And it really just kind of was a beautiful segue into, months down the road where I thought, oh my goodness, I haven't overthought food and exercise in my body in so long.
God, you literally are speaking my language. I love this. This is definitely what I tell other people as well. And I think, I cannot recall, are you a personal trainer?
I am. I'm a certified personal trainer.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a strength and conditioning specialist. And one thing that's so interesting is that, because you're talking about doing something that you love, and I preach that now, but back in the past when I got certified as a personal trainer, and then I got my CSCS certification, everything's like by the books. And I remember personal training people, and like it was like, different exercises, but all the same basic routine. If they hated it, it's like, well, I'm sorry, like this is what I know.
Yes.
And I think that I had that shift myself and conveying that to other people. And now I, just like you said, like surfing, I mean, that stuff's hard. Like as long as you're doing something you love, just like with the industry failing us, like you're going to fail, and it's not your fault, but it's because you think you need to do X, Y, Z, and in reality, just move. I think I recently saw you mention something somewhere, I don't recall where, about like the joy of just like taking a walk.
Yes. And you know what, Hope, I so can relate to your story, because you're right. In all of our textbooks, it's, here's how to get your client from point A to point B. But I think that they're missing the bigger picture. And that is, there's so much more to your health journey than the exercise that you're doing.
Oh my gosh.
It's what's going on in your career? What's going on in your relationships?
Yes.
How is your relationship to food? I mean, it's all interconnected. And yet people think, well, I just need to figure, if I can just get on a meal plan and I can get on a program for my fitness, I'll be fine. And it's like, well, if that hasn't worked for you in the past 10 years, then something's probably got to change. And, so I think to your point, it's, we have to find the joy in exercise. And for me now, one of the things I love the most is going outside, being in nature and walking. And that took a lot of practice. That didn't happen overnight, but I actually found when I allowed my body to tell me what it wanted, that it loves gentle exercise, specifically walking. And I mean, I have my best breakthroughs, my best business ideas when I'm walking. So why wouldn't I go and walk more,
Oh my gosh, I love it. Yes, that's so good. I love that so much. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that statement too, because I noticed with some listeners, as well as just people that follow, Hopeful Health, that many of them are attracted to the concept of when I did a lot of fitness videos and exercise things. And I think that we have to go deeper than that. And I can continue posting exercise videos, but don't feel like you have to do that move. I love that move. There's certain moves, there's certain workouts I love, and some of them I wouldn't even post on social media because they're not meant for you. And I think starting with like walking, and all bodies love that kind of exercise anyways. And I think it just helps, I don't know, almost like a mind reset. You get to kind of think, like, for once you're not rushed. Because even if you enjoy like high intensity things, like you're going so hard you can't even think, you can't even reflect. And I think walking is a beautiful thing to reflect on so many areas of your life. I love that.
Yep, I completely agree.
Oh, I love it. So how, you briefly touched upon this, but how long would you say this whole, it's a lifelong journey really, but the process of truly like embracing it from start to finish, you said a year and a half before meeting your now husband. So how long would you say it took for you to kind of get into this embracing mode?
I would say around, a year to a year and a half. And I think it's going to vary dependent upon, the severity for certain people. And I, because I had certain circumstances in my life that exasperated my perfectionism, I think that's one of the reasons why it maybe took me longer than someone else. But, for the listeners, I want you to know that there is no right amount of time. If, you're listening to this story and you're thinking, well, I'm 2 years in and I'm still not there, it's totally okay. And you will get there. Just try not to compare your journey to anyone else's, and remember that, keep at it. And it's a lifelong journey. I mean, I have learned how to embrace it and the ways that I need to sort of catch myself so that it doesn't take over my life. But it will continue to come up. I always have to keep it at the forefront of my mind, or else it does take over my life, So I would say it was, about a year to a year and a half. And I think a lot of times, Hope, we choose work in the world. We want to help others, but it's also, in retrospect, helping ourselves. And there's a reason why my mission is to help people with progress over perfection, because it also stays very real for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more when I first started Hopeful Health. I mean, I was focused on diabetes, and I didn't recognize until, and this is what I love, like talking to you about perfectionism and vulnerability. Like, vulnerability has actually helped me serve in a larger capacity now, because when I looked back halfway through really like starting my business, I was like, I'm teaching something and I'm not even
connected.
I'm not right with it. Yeah, like I was practicing what was quote unquote right. I was eating quote unquote healthy foods and exercising, and I wasn't getting to the bottom of it for myself, and therefore I couldn't serve other people. And I think that what you said is so true in relation to that. And now I have that ability to serve more and at a greater capacity. And when I have a hiccup, I'm very willing to share it with other people. And, as I'm going along, or I discover new things, or, maybe a book I read is now outdated about certain practices, like sharing that knowledge. And, hey, I'm the best that I can be right now, but it's always going to be a work in progress, because we change, life changes, everything changes. So I really like that.
Yeah. And I think too, to your point, I mean, when you can be vulnerable with your audience, and, for the people that are listening to this, when you can be vulnerable with your friends and your family, your coworkers, basically what you're saying is, this is the real me. You're not alone. I'm not perfect. And it helps people to, at the end of the day, Hope, we all just want to know that we're not alone. And that's the beauty of vulnerability, is it encompasses everyone. We're all in this together. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And what's funny is, and this isn't to say, that everything you post on social media should be, a downer or whatever, but the times where I have truly struggled and I have sat down and written something literally, not expecting anything, those are the things that went through the roof, because people were like, wow, I can relate to that. I can relate to your struggles. When you're showing your perfect self on Instagram, people can't relate to that, because that's not how life is. So when you can take the opportunity to say, hey, I woke up this morning, stubbed my toe, then I poured coffee all over my pants. It's like, that's what life is. At the end of the day, like, it's the same for all of us. None of us are living a perfect life.
Absolutely. And that I agree with that message too. I'm really saying the same thing over and over, that I really agree. But I love that, because one thing that I've started is a community called Beyond the Label. And I talk about having positivity in there, but it's not, you can't talk about true life, like what happened, you stubbed your toe and spilled coffee, but it's understanding, kind of like you said, accepting and embracing, like, oh, my rats, like I stubbed my toe, I spilled my coffee, but I still have this interview with Allie to look forward to, or something, like having a new perspective on that, and, doing something that's relatable, but then always trying to come on top of your situations, I guess, be be
For
on top
sure.
of it. Yeah.
There's always a way that you can take a struggle and circle back and tell people, and here's the lesson I learned from it. Here's how I
Yes.
overcame it. Here's how I realized that it was a blessing in disguise.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Whew, okay. So you have mentioned so much. And so this question may be kind of challenging, but we've got to isolate it. What was the one thing that you confidently can say that was key to your success?
Definitely the self-love, hands down. Without being able to accept myself and love myself, none of the other stuff works. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that I want people to understand is, if your fitness program isn't working, if your food isn't working, you need to look deeper, because this industry, in a lot of ways, Hope, is very superficial. And
Yes.
we miss the mark when we don't ask people those hard questions, like our clients. Like, hey, I hear you and I know that you're doing all your exercises and you're eating really well, but what's going on in your relationships? What's going on at work? How is your stress level? There are so many other aspects. And when we're speaking poorly to ourselves and we aren't respecting our own bodies, we can't get anywhere. We will never make lasting progress. That's why, people will have a big breakthrough, but then they will always go back to where they were. And it's frustrating. And so if we can come at it from a place of slow and steady, but I'm going to love myself through the process. And it sounds really woo-woo. And I'm not saying every day you need to wake up and look at yourself in the mirror and recite 100 things, but this stuff really does work. And so if you want to make changes, I would just encourage people to be open to it. Be open.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Woo-woo stuff. I used to be so anti this stuff until I finally said, Hope, you've got to make a change. And I implemented it. And it's ridiculous how well just one little thought, like if you wake up, open your eyes, and you're like, I am going to rock today. Like that alone could like transform your day. And it's crazy. I'm talking about woo-woo stuff more and more often these days.
And I realized in my journey, Hope, that we have the power to change our day. And it's one of the reasons why I try very hard to not start my day scrolling through social media, not start my day with email, because that's my golden hour to go out into nature, set the standard for the day, remind myself what I'm here to do, what my mission is, and really ask for guidance. How can I best show up to serve people today? Because what happens is when we do the opposite, when we watch the news and we go on social media right away, we're allowing external things to basically start our day, and you're letting other people have control, right? So take that back in your hands. This is your time to find a great routine in the morning that's really going to set you up for a productive, rockin' day.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, okay, speaking of self-love, is there like a particular book or resource or anything that you think the listeners could really utilize and learn from to really learn how to embrace this whole concept of self-love, or really anything related to perfectionism?
Absolutely. Without a doubt, when I went through my divorce, right after that, I discovered an author who at the time was very up and coming. She had just done a few YouTube sensation videos, so her name was starting to float around more. And when I mention her name, people most likely will say, "Oh yeah, I know who she is." But I discovered her when she really only had 2 books out, and that is Brené Brown. And Brené Brown's work, I get chills when I say her name, because it profoundly impacted the way that I live my life, the way that I am in my relationships. Her work is so incredible. She's such a sensational writer. And she has 3 books that I truly loved. And the first one was I Thought It Was Just Me. I'm sorry. It's called The Gift of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, and then her most recent book, which is called Rising Strong. And these books, you don't have to have gone through a divorce or even if you don't truly consider yourself a perfectionist, everybody can get so much out of these books because she provides us with so much research. You know, she's a vulnerability researcher with hard facts about why it's so hard for us to be vulnerable. You know, specifically men, you know, we've previously had this notion that, you know, men aren't supposed to be vulnerable. And so these books were certainly the catalyst for change for me.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you have multiple books too, since they all serve they have a different purpose for each one. So I love that. So tell me, do you have kind of a favorite quote or something that continues to inspires you and continues you to really keep striving for this self-love and embracing and accepting and really yourself?
Definitely. You know, this goes back to, you know, the author, of course, that I mentioned, and one of her quotes from one of her books says, "Imperfections are not inadequacies. They are reminders that we are in this together." And that's Brené Brown. And I think it's so powerful because once again, when we can embrace our imperfections, when we can start to come to terms that we all have our own things and that we're here on this planet together. Like, we're in this together. We're not here for ourselves. We're meant to collaborate. We're meant to have community. And one of the best things that you can do is embrace what God gave you. Rather than running from it, you know, it's embrace it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So this has been so good. I've literally been nodding my head the whole time in agreement with everything that you said. And I feel like you resonated with so many listeners and they're all so eager to learn more. So tell us where people can learn more about you.
Definitely. So one of the main ways that people can learn more about me is my website, which is my business is called Ready Fit. Ready is my maiden name, spelled RETI, and then it's just FIT, so readyfit.com. But I also have a podcast called Progress Over Perfection. And, you know, the title says it all. It really is my mission on this planet, Hope, to help as many people as possible realize that there is life beyond perfectionism. And the podcast, a lot of it is, in specific to, overcoming struggles with food and body and exercise. And I do have a lot of guests that talk a lot about other topics that I personally feel like are really important to our journey. As we mentioned in this episode earlier, this is not just about food and exercise. There's so many other components. And that's one of my favorite places that people can come and hang out and just learn more. And then, of course, social media handles. I am ReadyFit, RETIFIT, basically at every handle: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Periscope. That's where people can find me.
Oh my gosh. Well, I know people will be hopping all over that because this is golden information. And I'm literally like picturing in my mind right now, people going to look you up because this was phenomenal.
You're sweet.
Well, it really is so powerful and so great. And I can't wait to hear more episodes from your podcast as well, from these people speaking on all these different areas, because we all, no matter where we're at in our journey in life, we all have these struggles that we face. And what's interesting is you said a lot of your stuff is about body image. And I think that that's definitely heavy for the females, but outside of that, just one of the struggles is that food is required in life and food fuels. And so we've got to eat it. And, ideally, hopefully that we're able to move. And so we need to figure out how to find that balance and how to understand that it starts with the mind and go from there and just realize what a beautiful soul you naturally are. So I cannot wait to hear more myself.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope that people will understand and take away from this episode, again, like we've said many times, that, if you're struggling, please don't feel shameful. Please don't feel like you are a failure. There is so much hope. And, maybe you just haven't found the right mentors until now. You've got this awesome podcast and many other resources, but just remember to not give up. And there really is a place where you can live your life without having to overthink food and exercise, and you can overcome your self-doubt, so just don't give up.
Absolutely. That's perfect way to end, Allie. I thank you so much. We're so grateful to have you on the show today and look forward to potentially having you back, because I think that this was such an awesome episode.
Thank you, Hope.
No problem. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. It means the world to me to be able to serve you and help you live beyond. If you found today's episode helpful or beneficial or share-worthy, I would love a review in iTunes. A review in iTunes allows me to know what was helpful and allows us together to continue to change lives and help other people live beyond their diagnosis or label. And if you did find this share-worthy or helpful, be sure to subscribe to this podcast. If you're on an Apple device, you can go to the podcast app or the iTunes store and type in Living Beyond with Hope, and there you can subscribe or listen to other episodes. When you subscribe, this allows you to know when there's a new podcast released. If you're on an Android device, no worries, I got you. All you have to do is download the Stitcher app and search for Living Beyond with Hope there and subscribe there. You can also go to www.livingbeyondwithhope.com if you would like to listen to the episode again, if you would like to see the show notes and any links that were mentioned in this episode. Today's episode was also brought to you by my Living Beyond the Label audiobook. If you enjoyed this and you like hanging out with me in your ear, then you would love to get your hands on this audiobook. It helps us together strategize your best and most balanced life. If you want to learn more about it and to get your hands on the audio and the worksheets that go with it, you can go to www.mybalanceplan.com. The link is also in the show notes, and there you'll be able to start strategizing your best life. Have an amazing rest of your day, and remember to keep living beyond.